The song of Orpheus and Eurydice in the heart of ancient Greece, where time seemed woven with both sunlight and shadow, lived Orpheus, a musician whose talent seemed touched by the divine. His name was whispered through city-states, from the temples of Athens to the hidden coves of Crete. When Orpheus strummed his lyre, a golden instrument gifted by Apollo himself, the world held its breath. Trees bent to hear him, the wind stilled, and even the mighty lions of Nemea lay down in peace. His music spoke not only to ears but to the very essence of existence, stirring the deepest parts of the soul. It was during one such performance, when the air shimmered with the lingering notes of his song, that Eurydice first appeared. A nymph as radiant as dawn, Eurydice was known to dance barefoot through wildflower meadows, her laughter a melody that seemed to harmonize with the wind. Her eyes were pools of deep green, glistening with both mischief and wisdom. The moment their eyes met, Orpheus's fingers faltered on his lyre, as if struck by an unseen bolt of Zeus's lightning. The music between them, however, required no strings. It resonated in the air between glances, whispered in the touch of their hands, and sang in the spaces where words dared not tread. Their love story blossomed as swiftly as spring, fierce and unapologetic. They spent days wandering through olive groves where silvery leaves murmured blessings from ancient deities, and nights by the fire, sharing stories that melted into song. Orpheus composed ballads for Eurydice, each more enchanting than the last. Lovers and poets spoke of them as if they were characters from a myth, too perfect, too intertwined to belong to the mortal world. But in Greece, where gods were fickle and fate even more so, joy was a fragile thread easily frayed. One golden afternoon, when the sun painted the sky with its fiery hues, Orpheus and Eurydice found themselves in a secluded grove, the soft rustle of olive leaves creating a harmony with the distant call of doves. Orpheus's fingers danced over the strings of his lyre, crafting a song that made even the bees pause their flight. Eurydice, lost in the music, twirled and laughed, her feet tracing ancient patterns on the soft, warm earth. Neither noticed the serpent, its scales dark as the deepest night, slithering through the grass like a silent omen. A sudden, sharp pain shot through Eurydice's ankle, a cruel sting that stole her breath. She gasped, eyes wide with surprise and fear as she stumbled backward. Orpheus was at her side in an instant, his lyre forgotten on the ground. But the poison worked quickly, and Eurydice's life ebbed like the tide, her hand slipping from his grasp as the world around them seemed to darken. The grove, once filled with music, now echoed with Orpheus's cries. The birds that had perched to listen to his song took wing, scattering like black petals in the wind. Orpheus clutched Eurydice's lifeless form, her golden hair falling over his arms, and knew that a part of him had died with her. The days that followed were marked by a silence so heavy it suffocated. Orpheus's songs turned into dirges, each note resonating with such anguish that the heavens themselves trembled. The gods watched from their celestial thrones, murmuring among themselves. Apollo, saddened by the grief that silenced his favored musician, spoke to Persephone, queen of the underworld, whose own story was one of love stolen by fate. Moved by Orpheus's sorrow, Persephone turned her gaze to Hades. Orpheus, in his despair, found himself at the temple of Apollo, praying with words soaked in desperation. The god's answer was not in spoken word, but in a warmth that seeped into Orpheus's heart, an understanding that he must descend into the realm of the dead and confront death itself. The entrance to the underworld lay hidden in a cave that exhaled cold, damp air, buried deep within a forest that no mortal dared enter. Ancient, gnarled trees loomed overhead, their twisted branches clawing at the sky. Orpheus stood at the mouth of the cave, his lyre slung over his back and a determination as fierce as any warrior's. He whispered Eurydice's name and stepped into the shadows. The journey through the underworld was a trial few mortals ever spoke of, for few returned to speak of it. The river Styx stretched before him, a dark mirror that reflected not light, but memories. Charon, The ferryman, whose eyes gleamed with an unnatural knowing, awaited. He seemed to recognize Orpheus, tilting his head as if considering whether to refuse the mortal passage. But Orpheus played a note, one so filled with raw, unyielding love that Charon's bony fingers tightened on his oar, and he gestured for Orpheus to board. The river whispered secrets, promises, and threats as the boat drifted forward. Shades of the dead, formless and flickering, reached out, their touch cold as ice, their eyes filled with a longing Orpheus dared not meet. The shore of the underworld emerged like a nightmare sculpted in stone, and there stood Cerberus, the monstrous three-headed guardian, each head crowned with eyes that burned like coals. The beast's growls reverberated through the cavern, a challenge to the audacity of a mortal's trespass. Orpheus's fingers brushed the strings of his lyre, and he played a lullaby, a song Eurydice had once hummed to calm restless lambs in the field. The hound's growls softened. One head leaned down, eyes half-lidded, and soon the beast lay still, ensnared by the music. Orpheus stepped past, each footfall echoing against the stone as he ventured deeper into the realm where no light ventured. He came upon fields of asphodel, where souls wandered, lost in dreams of forgotten lives. Their eyes turned to Orpheus, faces spectral and sad, drawn to the living man who dared to disturb their eternal rest. His song carried through the fields, notes of love and longing that resonated even with the dead. And so they parted, clearing his path to the dark palace where Hades and Persephone sat in thrones carved of shadow and flame. Hades's eyes, black as the abyss, met Orpheus's defiant gaze. Persephone, who had once been a goddess of the spring before becoming queen of the underworld, watched with an expression that held both pity and remembrance. Orpheus knelt, his voice breaking as he spoke. "I come not to defy death, but to bargain with it. Let my song be my plea." The lyre's strings trembled beneath his fingers, and what followed was not mere music but the raw essence of devotion. Each note painted a picture: Eurydice's laughter on a summer's day, the shared warmth of an embrace, the quiet moments beneath the stars. His song climbed, swelled, and wept, and the entire underworld seemed to pause, even the rivers slowing their restless currents. Tears, like drops of silver, slipped from Persephone's eyes, and even the shadows seemed to soften. Hades's impassive face flickered with something between resignation and envy for the kind of love that could transcend life itself. "Take her," Hades finally said, his voice a deep rumble that quaked the floor. "But heed my command. She must follow, and you must not look back until you are both under the sun's light. Fail, and she will be lost to you forever." Orpheus bowed his head, gratitude and fear tangling within him. Eurydice emerged from the dark, her form more ethereal, a pale echo of the vibrant woman she had been. Yet her eyes, those deep green eyes, glistened with recognition and hope. Without a word, Orpheus turned and began the long ascent, the weight of Hades's condition pressing like an iron band around his heart. The path back was shrouded in silence, broken only by the quiet shuffle of Eurydice's steps. Each moment stretched, taut with the burden of trust and doubt. Orpheus could feel her presence as though she were a part of him, close yet unbearably distant. The light at the end of the tunnel glimmered, the mouth of the cave where the living world waited. But doubt, insidious as the serpent that had struck Eurydice, coiled within Orpheus's chest. What if this was all a cruel jest of the gods? What if the silence behind him was not Eurydice but empty air, a trick to mock his love? With the threshold so near he could taste the sun's warmth, Orpheus faltered. A breath, a moment of weakness, and he turned. Eurydice stood behind him, her face etched with a sad smile that forgave even this. Their eyes met for a heartbeat, then two, and then she was gone, pulled back into the shadows, dissolving like mist under a harsh wind. The silence that followed was deafening, the finality suffocating. Orpheus fell to his knees as the light of the living world spilled over him, blinding and harsh against the darkness he carried within. The echo of Eurydice's name trembled on his lips, but there was no answer, no whisper, not even the mournful rustle of the underworld's winds. She was gone, drawn back into the cold embrace of death, and with her, the last remnants of his heart were wrenched away. Time passed, though Orpheus could no longer measure it by the sun or stars. He wandered through Greece, a hollow spectre of the man he once was. His lyre, once an instrument of joy and love, now released only songs filled with despair so deep that it resonated through the mountains and valleys. Shepherds would stop in their pastures, eyes wet with tears they didn't understand, and sailors would hear his music echoing over the waves, believing they were listening to the mourning of the sea itself. The gods, from their seats on Olympus, watched with an uncharacteristic silence. Even Dionysus, god of revelry and chaos, found himself restless as Orpheus's sorrow seeped into the mortal realm, turning festivals into vigils and wine into bitter draughts. It was said that Aphrodite wept, not for the love lost, but for the reminder that even gods could not best the cruelty of fate. As Orpheus's legend grew, so did the whispers among the people. They spoke of the man who had defied death itself, whose music could bend the will of gods, but who had lost everything. His songs carried warnings and truths that resonated deeper than the sharpest blade. Love was the mightiest and most fragile force of all, and hope, though eternal, came with a price. One day, Orpheus found himself at the foot of Mount Olympus. It was not an accident. The mountain had called to him, as though even its towering peaks felt the weight of his sorrow. He sat on the stony ground, the shadows of the gods looming high above him, and began to play his lyre. The song was unlike any before it, filled not only with grief but a final, deep acceptance. It told of joy and pain, the rise and fall of hearts that dared to love. It was a song that spoke of how beauty and tragedy were forever intertwined. The song rose to the heavens, reaching the ears of the gods themselves. Hera, who had known loss, looked away, and even Zeus, the king of gods, felt a tremor in his divine heart. The melody drifted down the mountain, touching villages and fields, forests and seas. It was said that even the fates paused their weaving for a moment, fingers frozen above their threads. But Orpheus, as he reached the final note, felt the release of 1,000 heartaches. The lyre slipped from his hands, and a silence fell over the world that even the gods did not dare break. He stood, eyes turned toward the sky where Eurydice's face lived now only in his memory, and he knew his time among the living was done. The Maenads, wild followers of Dionysus, came upon him in their frenzied dance, their eyes glazed with the ecstasy of their god. They did not see the man of legend, only a lonely figure who did not join their revelry. In their madness, they tore him apart, scattering the pieces of Orpheus across the lands. But even in death, his story did not end. The Muses, mourning their favored mortal, gathered the remnants of his lyre and placed them among the stars, so that every night when mortals gazed at the sky, they would remember the man who loved so fiercely that even the gods wept for him. And in the underworld, a whisper of Orpheus's song lingered, drifting through the fields of asphodel, where Eurydice walked. She paused, a smile touching her lips as she heard the faint echo of the melody that had once brought her back to life, and for a moment, even in the shadowed realm, love lit the darkness. Orpheus's tale became more than just a story. It was a testament to the boundless reaches of the human heart and the truths that lay between life and death, love and loss. It was a reminder that some songs never end, echoing through eternity, binding souls across worlds, defying even the hands of fate.